A motorcycle is the only machine on Earth built to be heard before it is seen. Loud on purpose, engineered to announce itself from 3 streets away and turn heads it has not even reached yet. So it should be impossible for an entire sport built on that noise to die in silence. There is no crash here, no bankruptcy headline, no villain you can point at. And yet that is exactly what is happening right now, quietly, on almost every road in America. The average American motorcyclist is now 50 years old. In 1990, he was 32, and the riders who were supposed to replace him, the teenagers, the 20-somethings, the next generation that every era before this one produced right on schedule, they simply never showed up. This is a boom ending the way a tide goes out. You never catch it moving. You just notice one day that the water is gone and the boats are sitting in the mud. So how does the loudest hobby ever invented vanish without a sound? Who walked away? Who got left holding the keys? And why is almost nobody inside the industry willing to say it out loud? Settle in, because this goes a great deal deeper than one bad sales year. Here is why nobody is pulling the alarm. On the surface, motorcycling has never looked healthier. The machines are the finest that have ever existed. A modern bike will do things the legends of the 1970s could only dream about, and it will do them while sipping fuel and rarely leaving a drop of oil on your garage floor. The culture is everywhere too, in the films, in the fashion, in the endless scroll of your feed, all sunset rides and mountain passes, and that particular lean into a corner that looks like freedom itself. Then the world shut down in 2020 and something strange happened. People did not stop buying motorcycles. They bought more of them. Locked in their homes and cut off from crowds, millions of people went looking for a way out that did not involve sitting in a metal box, breathing everyone else's air. And a motorcycle was the perfect answer, solo and outdoors, about as far from a packed subway car as you could get. Showrooms that had crawled through the previous decade suddenly ran dry, wait lists formed, and first-time riders appeared in numbers the industry had not seen in years. For a moment, it genuinely looked like a golden age. The trade press wrote about a motorcycling renaissance. Dealers who had been nervously eyeing the exits started ordering more stock, hiring more staff, betting the good times were finally back for good. Magazines ran cover stories about the return of 2 wheels. Manufacturers talked up a whole new generation discovering the joy of riding. For about 18 months, the story wrote itself, and everyone wanted to believe it, because the alternative, the thing the long-term numbers had been quietly whispering the entire time, was too grim to say out loud. Then the world reopened, and the bikes that flew out the door during lockdown did not keep flying. Sales settled back toward where they had been before, which was already not a healthy place. And then in 2025, the number dipped again, just slightly, the kind of dip you would forget about by the next sentence. Except this one does not stop. And when you pull the numbers apart, that pandemic boom starts to look like a last gasp, the final surge of something that had been quietly dying for 30 years. Let's start with what everyone can see, because the surface numbers are bad enough on their own. In 2025, sales of new motorcycles and scooters in the United States fell 7.6%, down to 486,468 units. And this was not one weak corner of the market dragging the rest down. Every single major segment the Motorcycle Industry Council tracks finished the year in the red: cruisers, touring bikes, sport bikes, all of it. It got worse the closer you looked. The first half of 2025 was the weakest start to a year the American market had seen in over a decade. Roughly 271,205 bikes from January through June, down more than 9% on the year before. The first quarter alone was down over 10%, the worst opening 3 months since the financial crisis of 2008. Now there is an easy explanation sitting right there, and most of the coverage stopped at it. It is the economy. Interest rates had been high for a couple of years. Inflation had been chewing through household budgets. hitting the lower half of earners hardest, exactly the people who used to buy their first cheap bike. Consumer confidence dropped at points in 2025 to near record lows. Put all that together and you get a perfectly reasonable story that a motorcycle is a want and not a need. And when money is tight and borrowing is expensive, people hang on to the bike they already have instead of buying a new one. It is a recession pinch, the kind of thing that happens and then passes. And if that were the whole story, this would be a very boring video. Rates come down, wallets loosen, sales bounce back, everyone goes home happy. But here is the problem with the easy explanation. We have run this experiment before. The 2008 crash cut American motorcycle sales roughly in half, from more than 1 million a year down toward 500,000. And unlike a lot of industries, motorcycling never climbed back. It just sat down there in the basement for 15 years. The economy recovered, the stock market tripled, and motorcycle sales did not follow. That is the part that should have set off alarms a decade ago. A normal market recovers when the money comes back. This one didn't. It stayed flat on the floor while everything around it boomed. And that only happens when something structural is broken underneath, when the buyers are not coming back because they were never really replaced to begin with. Here is the fact that reframes the whole thing. The buyers did not disappear, they just got old. The Motorcycle Industry Council has been running an owner survey for decades, and the single clearest line in all of that data is age. In 1990, the median American motorcycle owner was 32 years old. By 2009, he was 40. By 2014, 47. And by 2018, 50. Think about the shape of that. The median climbed 8 years across 2 whole decades, and then jumped another 10 years in less than one. That is a market aging faster than time itself, because the old riders kept riding while the young ones never arrived to replace them. And when you look at the young end of the scale directly, it is genuinely alarming. Riders under 18, the kids on dirt bikes who grow into the adults on street bikes, went from 8% of owners down to 2%. The 18 to 24 group, the classic first bike buyers, collapsed from 16% down to 6%. The entire on-ramp into motorcycling, the pipeline that fed every previous generation, quietly narrowed to a trickle. So why did the young riders never come? Several reasons, stacked on top of each other, and every one of them points the same direction. Start with money. The generation that was supposed to buy its first bike is the one carrying the heaviest student debt, the flattest wages against the cost of living, and housing prices that swallow whatever is left over. A motorcycle is the definition of a thing you buy with money you do not strictly need, and fewer young people have any of that money to spare. Then there is insurance, which punishes exactly the people the industry most needs to recruit, because a rider in their early 20s is the most expensive person on the road to cover, and the premium alone can run higher than the payments on the bike. And underneath all of it sits the deepest change of all. A young person in a city today does not need a vehicle the way their parents did. Public transit, ride-hailing, an electric bike for the last mile. Between them, they handle daily life without anyone owning, insuring, storing, or fixing a single thing with an engine in it, which turns a motorcycle from something useful into something purely optional, a thing you would only buy for the sheer fun of it. And that fun now has to be worth enough to cover the cost, the danger, and the hassle all at once. For most 20-somethings, the math simply stopped adding up. If you want to watch this play out in real time, in the numbers of a single company, look at Harley-Davidson. Harley is not really a brand. It is a piece of national mythology, the sound of the open road, the bike your uncle swore by. And the numbers coming out of Milwaukee right now are brutal. In 2024, Harley shipped 148,862 motorcycles worldwide, already down more than 17% on the year before. Then 2025 came, and shipments fell another 16%, down to 124,477. Revenue at the motorcycle division dropped to about $3.58 billion, off 13% in a single year. But the totals are only half the story. The real tell is where the losses landed. The bikes bleeding the hardest are the big touring machines and the heavyweight cruisers, the Softail, the chrome barges that are the absolute core of the Harley identity. Harley's share of the American heavyweight class, bikes over 601 cubic centimeters, slipped to 34.5% in 2025, down from over 37% just the year before. And that is the demographic cliff made visible. The specific motorcycles dying fastest are the exact motorcycles one specific generation fell in love with. The boomer bought his big cruiser at 40 as the reward for a life of work. He is 70 now, he is not buying another one, and his grandson has no interest in a 500-pound machine that costs as much as a car and was built for a fantasy of the road that belongs to a different century. So the bikes were never really the problem here. The riders were the product all along, and the industry quietly ran out of new ones without ever admitting it was happening. But this is where somebody in the comments is already typing, because if this is really the end of motorcycling, why does so much of the rest of the world look nothing like America? Fair challenge, and it is worth taking seriously, because the answer is the whole point of this story. Look at Europe, and at first glance you might think the disease is spreading. In 2025, motorcycle registrations across the biggest European markets fell nearly 13%. On paper, that looks even worse than America. But it was a completely different kind of drop. A new emission standard called Euro 5 Plus was coming into force, so dealers and manufacturers front-loaded a huge wave of registrations the year before to clear old stock ahead of the rules. That inflated 2024 and made 2025 look like a collapse by comparison. And the proof is in what happened next. As soon as the correction cleared, the market snapped straight back, up more than 21% in the first quarter of 2026. Whatever that is, it is not a market dying. Because in Europe, the motorcycle is a fundamentally different thing than it became in America. There are close to 40 million motorcycles, scooters, and mopeds in daily use across European roads, and most of them are not weekend toys, they are transport. They slip through traffic that cars are stuck in, they park where cars cannot, they cost a fraction to run. And when a machine is woven into daily life like that, demand does not ride on anybody feeling nostalgic or flush. People replace the tool because they still need the tool. Now hold that up against Japan. Japan is the birthplace of the modern motorcycle industry, the home of Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, and Kawasaki. If motorcycling were dying purely because of some global shift in taste, Japan should be immune. It is not. The Japanese market fell almost 5% in 2025, and then fell another 12% through the first half of 2026. Japan, like America, is aging. Its riders skew older and more recreational too, and wherever the bike drifted toward being a hobby, the same slow fade set in. So the pattern here was never really about geography, it was about meaning, and it comes down to one blunt question you can ask of any motorcycle market on Earth. Is the bike a toy or is it a tool? Where the motorcycle stays a tool, real transport that people depend on, it survives almost anything. Recessions, emissions rules, high interest rates, because people still need to get to work. But where the motorcycle became a toy, a weekend identity, a chrome trophy bought in midlife to feel something again, it lives and dies with the generation that bought the fantasy. And America built the purest toy market in the world. It did not start out that way, which is the strange part. When Japanese bikes first swept into America in the 1960s, they were sold as cheerful, friendly, everyday transport on the gentle promise that you meet the nicest people on a Honda. But America did not keep that story. It rewrote the motorcycle into something louder, an outlaw, a symbol of rebellion and midlife escape, and it sold that myth brilliantly for the better part of 50 years. It turned the motorcycle into a feeling, a lifestyle you wore on a leather jacket. That sold millions of bikes. But a feeling cannot be handed down on a schedule. The believers aged, the next ones never signed up, and America was left having built a whole culture around the motorcycle without ever building the everyday transport network underneath it, the thing that might have caught the fall. Which leaves the strangest part of all, because if the boom is quietly ending in America, you would assume motorcycling itself must be shrinking. It is not. Globally, the motorcycle is booming harder than at any point in history. You are just looking in the wrong place for it. The boom never really ended. It just went home, back to where it started. In the first 10 months of 2025 alone, roughly 55 million two-wheelers were sold around the world. Let that number sit for a second. And of that total, India and China by themselves accounted for around 28 million of them. More than half the entire planet's sales coming from just 2 countries. That is the largest personal transport boom on Earth, and it is simply happening on the roads that Western cameras never point at, and it is transforming as it goes. The gasoline engine that defined the motorcycle for a century is quietly being swapped out for a battery. In China, electric two-wheelers now make up nearly 55% of the market, more than half of everything sold. In Vietnam, the electric share leapt to almost 22% in a single stretch. 95% of every electric two-wheeler on Earth is sold in just 3 countries: China, India, and Vietnam. The future of the motorcycle is being built right now, and it is small, cheap, silent, and it plugs into a wall. And this did not happen by accident. Across many of China's biggest cities, gasoline motorcycles were banned outright from the center to fight congestion and choking smog, while cheap, low-speed electric two-wheelers were waved straight through, some of them not even needing a license. On top of that grew an entire delivery economy, whole armies of riders ferrying food and parcels through traffic on machines that cost almost nothing to charge. Price was not the only reason the battery won. The cities themselves reached in and picked it. Here's the twist that should stop you cold. Even in America, the only real bright spots point in exactly this direction. In 2025, while the big cruisers bled out, sport bike sales actually rose 13%, and every bit of that growth came from smaller, sub-750cc machines. The adventure category is up more than 52% since 2019, led by the smaller displacement bikes. Strip away the nostalgia, and the same signal is flashing everywhere on the planet. Even here, small, cheap, practical machines winning out over chrome barges, which is the exact recipe of the machine that started all of this in the first place. There is one motorcycle that has outsold every other vehicle in human history. Not the best-selling motorcycle, the best-selling motor vehicle on 2 wheels or 4 ever made. A tiny Japanese step-through called the Honda Super Cub. By October of 2017, Honda had built more than 100 million of them, a world record for a single machine, and the total has since climbed past 110 million. It is the bike that put the developing world on wheels, small and cheap and nearly unkillable, and it is the living blueprint for the electric two-wheelers flooding Asia right now. And in a small but telling detail, model year 2024 was the last Super Cub Honda offered in America. There was no press release, no farewell. For 2025, the best-selling vehicle in the history of the world simply disappeared from the American Honda website, and almost nobody noticed it was gone. So walk back out to that empty road from the very beginning and listen to the silence again, because now you know what it means. What is ending here is not motorcycling. The motorcycle is doing better than it ever has. What is ending is one very particular, very American idea of it. The loud one, the chrome one, the open road, wind in your face, buy it at 50 to feel alive one. That idea was always a kind of luxury, a story a rich and comfortable country told itself about freedom. And stories like that only survive as long as new people keep believing them. The believers grew old, the next ones never signed up, and the tide is going out on that whole beautiful roaring fantasy. And the hardest part is that the industry saw it coming. The owner surveys were flashing red 20 years ago, with the average age climbing higher in report after report, and for most of that time the response was to keep selling bigger, heavier, more expensive machines to the aging customers who were already in the door. It was the easiest money in the world, right up until the day it wasn't. The strange thing is that the machine itself is coming full circle. It began as a cheap, practical little tool that handed ordinary people their freedom. And after a century of getting bigger and louder and pricier and more about identity, it is quietly turning back into a cheap, practical little tool again, only electric this time. The boom never died. It just grew up and moved somewhere new. If you want the story of how that American boom was built in the first place, how 4 Japanese companies that used to make looms and pianos and warships walked in and took over the entire motorcycle world in about 25 years, that is the one I would watch next. And it makes everything you just heard land a little differently. But for now, just sit with the quiet for a second. Somewhere out there, an engine that was built to be heard from 3 streets away is fading down a long, empty road with nobody young enough to follow it. And that, more than any sales chart, is the sound of a boom ending in silence.